So in this episode, Team Flash take another step into finding out who Cicada is, and we finally get an origin story behind Killer Frost. Let's talk about The Flash Season 5 Episode 6, The Icicle Cometh. How's it going, speedsters? Welcome to my Flash Season 5 Episode 6 review and breakdown. Now, this episode was a good episode. It definitely lived up to what I was looking forward to in terms of Caitlin, Killer Frost backstory. Now, for the longest time, we haven't known so much about Killer Frost. Then we got teased last season with her origin. Her powers got kind of taken away, if you will. And this episode definitely delivered upon everything with that. Also, in this episode, since Nora and Iris have made up, we got some more bonding moments there. And obviously a little bit of Cicada teasers as well. So before I dive into the specifics of this episode, guys, be sure to subscribe to this channel if you're brand new and you want to see more Arrowverse videos just like this. And of course, click that like button if you do go on to enjoy this video, as it really does help the channel out. So with this episode essentially being about a lot of Killer Frost development, I didn't actually expect as much Cicada as we got in it, albeit I thought the last bits were kind of pointless, and I'll get to that in a second. But that intro scene where Cicada was just chilling and then his dagger has a freaking metahuman, I guess dark matter receiver, where it just picks up whenever a metahuman is going past. That is how obviously we got to the little fight scene where this lady got out this Terminator 2 like slicing blades, which made me laugh because they really do remind me. Is it Terminator 2 or Terminator 1? I can't remember, but you know what I mean. She managed to get a slice on Cicada, but you know, he does F her up with the dagger because he has all kinds of overpowered abilities. Now, this isn't all we got with Cicada scenes this episode. We also saw him in the hospital after he got sliced up, refusing to get patched up by that doctor, but we also know that this doctor actually sympathizes with what Cicada is doing. She actually, from what I gathered in this episode, hates what metahumans are doing to people, because obviously a lot of casualties or people she needs to patch up coming through the Central City Hospital are because of metahuman attacks. Eventually, for Cicada's story in the episode, he heads back home. He's like passing out because this guy is in a lot of pain. I think Chris Klein's doing a really good job so far with, you know, he doesn't have an awful lot of lines, but he's really pulling off this character really well, and how menacing he is, how he believes he has the right motivations for what he's doing in terms of protecting his daughter, if you will. But that is what I want to get onto now, because in that house, when the doctor came in from the hospital, we saw this family photo on the wall of Grace, Cicada's supposed daughter, but the parents, that wasn't Chris Klein, that wasn't Cicada. So I'm now wondering, did this episode just reveal to us that this isn't Cicada's daughter, but perhaps on the night of the satellite incident, perhaps they were going on a family outing, and he might be the uncle of this girl. He might be the brother of, you know, Grace's mother or something like that, right? And that is what we're going to see in the next episode, episode 7, which will be a huge Cicada kind of origin story episode, where I bet we will see people close to Cicada, whether it's his family, whether it's his sister's family, whether it's his brother's family, and then I'm guessing she and him are the only ones to survive this. But it could be something even way before that, which I think maybe is a bit more likely given the promo photos of next week's episode with the flashbacks. So I'm thinking that her parents passed away way before the satellite incident, or maybe, you know, a few months, I don't know. And he's been looking after her because, you know, he's a family member, as I mentioned, or he fostered her, adopted her, I don't know. But the trailer for next week's episode, for the flashbacks, he says something like, you know, I know we didn't get off to the best start, and we see them in a classroom in the promo photos. So bottom line, I think he's just been looking after her on behalf of the family that's passed away, whether he's adopted her, fostered her, or he was related to her. Went out on the satellite night. She got in a coma, he got injured. But going back to what I said was pointless about that ending scene, it just felt a bit pointless to me because we already knew what he said to the doctor. She was just like, oh, after I finish patching this up, I'm gonna patch up your chest as well, which is, you know, the wound, the dark matter wound. And he was just like, no, you know, this is making me stronger. And it's like the exact same ending, really, we got a few episodes back when obviously he was in pain, he was tearing his shirt off, and he completely crippled that metal pole, and all this did was tell us the exact same message but just saying it out loud. So I don't know, it just felt kind of pointless. But anyway, now finally moving on to the actual episode, The Icicle Cometh, because original Team Flash were going after Caitlin's dad because he never essentially left one of those Black Ops sites, which ended up being in the North Pole. Now I thought this was a really interesting story with Caitlin and her father this episode, with a couple of twists and turns that I didn't actually expect. I mean, we all knew that he would be Icicle one way or another. I theorized in my video a little while back, what if he has similar, activation of his powers in terms of, how if he gets angry like Killer Frost does, that's what brings his side out. So sort of a dual personality thing. And I really like how they explained his powers, with it being like how he experimented with cryogenics. We even got a cool name drop for a Batman villain, because he said that he stayed in contact with other scientists down there, one of them being Mr. Freeze, which is pretty cool. So when Caitlin first reunited with her father, that definitely gave me a little emotional heartthrob there. I was like, oh man, because I really like Caitlin. She hasn't always got the most plot, but now with this episode, I've been really looking forward to as to what has actually been going on. And now she's found her father, who she hasn't seen for 20 years. It was just really, really sweet, albeit that, obviously there was a lot more going on than what first met the eye. And Cisco was definitely catching on to that this episode, and Cisco was the man this episode. Now, also, as predicted by a lot of fans in terms of how Caitlin got her powers, it is indeed true that her father experimented upon Caitlin. But in his eyes, and this is the weird thing, because obviously this was the evil side of Caitlin's father, but there were some true things that he was saying, and this was one of them, in how Caitlin carried the ALS marker, gene marker, so he wanted to isolate that in her so she wouldn't get the illness that he had, and thus that's what created the Killer Frost powers and dual personalities in her. And so it's kind of messed up, even though he thought he was doing the right thing, cryogenically experimenting gene therapy on your daughter. That is very messed up. And I did like the emotional kind of drama that was thrown in this as well, because naturally Cisco being, I would say, the closest to Caitlin, obviously in Team Flash, or just the Flash in general, was kind of not believing what this guy was, saying to everyone in terms of his explanations. So he vibed a whole lot to do with that kind of liquid nitrogen incubatory kind of thing, where essentially the explanation is that this whole time we've been seeing the dual personality side, which is Icicle, of Caitlin's father, and Caitlin's father is deep down inside Icicle, but he hasn't seen the light of day personality wise in a long time. So this gives us the explanation as to why he was locked down there for so long, why Caitlin's mother never said anything about it. And I thought this was a really cool twist. Now, a lot of fans are saying that this episode was predictable, and as I've already said, a couple of bits were predictable. That doesn't mean that this story wasn't still very interesting, because since Caitlin was creating this cure that would cure her father from dying from the icicle disease or whatever, but what it would really do to the metahuman, or should I say the human, would completely make their human side go away, thus just leaving Icicle there permanently. And that is what Icicle wanted to happen this whole time, and also meaning that Caitlin's father is definitely in there, because why else would Icicle want to get rid of that side of himself? But if I remember correctly, there was a catch. He couldn't inject himself with that serum until there was sub-zero or even more cold temperatures than that, and that's what that whole kind of massive bit at the end was all about, with Nora and Barry going in trying to save them, but because it was so freaking freezing in there, that counteracts their speed. And this is where we actually, it all came to that moment when Killer Frost came out. Now, when I first saw this, I was like, really? All it took was just her to be forced with the right moment for it to come out, but thank God they gave us that explanation towards the end of the episode, and I'll get to that in a second. And now I was really happy and also emotional at the same time when Caitlin finally got Killer Frost back. Now this whole lead up explosion moment of the end of the episode was really cool. I really liked Icicle's powers, especially beforehand when he put little icicles in their lungs, thus they were gonna pass out. But in this moment as well, Caitlin demonstrated some really cool powers, and this is one thing that Killer Frost has always done. I believe in the Crisis on Earth X crossover, in that church scene, she got some freaking icicle sword, and in this scene she had an ice gauntlet or glove that she was punching her father with, or Icicle with, which I thought was really badass. They can do so many things with the shapes that Killer Frost can actually make physical with her powers, so I can't wait to see what else they can do in the future. Now I also found this weirdly interesting at the same time, because as soon as Killer Frost appeared, Icicle was like, oh, my daughter, because you have to think of it in this way. Obviously we have Dr. Thomas Snow and Caitlin Snow, father and daughter, but since this cryogenic gene therapy created literal counterparts to themselves, these dual personalities, these actual other people, Icicle was just like, oh, you're my, that's my daughter, take the serum with me, because he was essentially offering Killer Frost the ability to completely get rid of Caitlin, which I believe has been a thing in the past as well, but then we got that dialogue of no, I've got a family now and everything like that. And as much as I liked all of this, I do have to say, even though Killer Frost has become good, I definitely feel like they rushed her good side development in previous seasons, because she was a proper villain in the past. She was like, I'm not about working with anybody or anything like that. And now she's all like, oh, I've got a family. I've got people who love me and care about me, and I'm not going to inhibit the Caitlyn side. Now, I'm not negating the fact that Killer Frost has improved, but I just feel like they did it a bit too quick. But even so, I did love this at the same time, because it was really like sweet and sentimental in how Killer Frost had the opportunity to completely, get rid of Caitlyn Snow, but she was like, no, screw you, Dad. But either way, what I loved about Killer Frost, Icicle, Dr. Thomas Snow, and Caitlyn here is that there's like two sets of families. Icicle, Killer Frost, father and daughter, and Thomas Snow and Caitlyn. But anyway, going back to what I said in terms of the explanation that I needed, because if it would have just been like, oh, I just had to, summon Killer Frost the right way, it would have been so anticlimactic. It's like, oh, well, you could have just done that anytime. Sure, like she couldn't because she just didn't, but she could have. Obviously, this is our explanation in the future of how Caitlyn won't need that activity dampener to use Killer Frost because she's been using it in between episodes. But the reason why Caitlyn couldn't use her Killer Frost powers is because of the brainstorm side of DeVoe basically switched that side of her brain off, and all she needs to do is reawaken her. So I thought that was a really good explanation. Thank God they said it, because as I said, it would have been pretty like crap, to be honest, if it was just like, oh, I just needed to summon the spirit to get Killer Frost. Plus, when Caitlyn put the mental activity dampener on her head, to contact Killer Frost, and she was like, hey, stranger, we've got a lot to catch up on. I was just like, oh, man, it's really good to see, I just really love that she has that other person, and she has been missing her this whole time, and now she can finally start to feel whole again. Now, as for Nora and Iris this episode, what I really liked about their storyline is, after making up the previous episode or the episode before that, I can't even remember right now, but you could really tell Iris and Nora were getting along, and I really liked Iris's, I don't know, the way she acted around Nora, because Nora was doing a lot of things where she was expressing interest in her mother, and she was putting effort in. I think they even said that, when she was talking to Harry, I thought it'd be a good idea if I came along, blah, blah, blah. But you could tell how much Iris appreciated that, and she was like, you're asking me about this? But just things like when Nora was finding out how to create a vortex on the waves, to get the satellite core this episode. Now, as for the Ralph and Cecile moments in this, I'm of two minds here. I definitely think what we saw, and as much as what we saw in today's episode with Cecile moments and like the spoofy jokey moments, where I don't know, I just felt like some of it was a bit cringy, and I know I get criticized all the time where I say, how can you find this cringy where there's so many other cringy moments, blah blah blah. I'm just saying, the moments with the really spoofy music in the background, etc, etc, I just felt like some of it was funny, like it definitely was, but I felt like there was too much of it, like way too much of it, that could have been dedicated screen time to more of Caitlyn's story, or just some other scenes. Like we could have seen Nora actually do that moment on the sea and use her powers to get the satellite out the waves or wherever it was, right? But no, we got just like Cecile trying to get a mojo back. And I know like some of this is because Joe isn't in the Flash right now, and there would have been scenes with him. I do like how they're investigating, and this did help out this whole Cicada thing, and they actually put it down to in the final scene, like, oh, we basically know Cicada's daughter, even though it probably isn't his daughter, but they know how to find him now, since there's only like a couple of cases of where a child was submitted with an injury that night of the satellite. So it definitely did serve a purpose this episode, but I think quite a lot of you will know what I mean with how it just felt a bit too spoofy. Like it just wasn't, I felt like all of it wasn't necessary. Anyway, everyone, that just about sums up my thoughts on this episode. I definitely really liked the Killer Frost side to it. It was really enjoyable. I'm glad we've got Killer Frost back. We got some context behind how she was created. Obviously, her father is out there now. The Cicada stuff was okay. The biggest takeaway from that was that family photo, I feel. Apart from that, a lot of it was just like throwing Cicada in there for the sake of it, to show him killing a metahuman. And then that kind of like, we didn't need that scene at the end to show that the injury is making him stronger, because as I said, we've already seen that and they've made a point of that. I feel like what they did there is that they were just completely spelling it out that he is getting stronger for people who would have missed it through him crippling an actual metal pole. Aside from that, everyone, let me know what you thought about this episode down in the comments below. Did you agree with anything I said? Did you disagree? Let me know. Everyone has different opinions, so you may have enjoyed some bits that I may have not have, or you might have found some bits cooler than what I thought was just okay. Subscribe to this channel for more Flash videos just like this. The trailer breakdown should be up at some point today. It should be in the cards above if it is up in a few hours time. But thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you speedsters in the next video. Goodbye.